Elijah Molden, a player many of you mock to the 49ers at 42, a player that has wormed his way into many a heart of 49ers fans, a player that we're going to break down in our defensive scouting report for the options at 42 for the 49ers. We're going to bring you 8 plays that we think really encapsulate his game, that paints the picture of a player who is going to do a couple of things really well, but also has some pretty clear limitations that you have to be aware of if you're going to draft someone like him in the second round. David, let's start with the first play, and it's going to be something that he did often, something he did very, very well, and that is basically blow up screens or anything within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, it was very good, right around the line of scrimmage and on kind of some of the shorter stuff. And so here, basically just going to get, a screen from the back out, and he's going to have this wide receiver that's trying to block him here. This is Molden here in the slot. And I think this is something that we just saw. I mean, there were literally just dozens and dozens of plays like this on his tape where you see him just do a really good job. So, I mean, with screens, a lot of it comes down to, in a lot of ways, kind of like run fits, right? So screens, you have to make sure that you're taking the right leverage on the block and make sure that you're funneling things to the correct place. And so with him being in the slot here, predominantly, a lot of times what he's going to end up being is the force player. So you have this cornerback, right? He's going to have kind of sideline contained, so he needs to keep outside leverage here and make sure that nothing gets free up the sideline. And Molden's really going to be the guy that's responsible for this gap right here between these two receivers. And so he wants to make sure to attack the outside of that receiver, which he does a great job of, and then it's just defeating the block and making a tackle, kind of with a guy still hanging on him there. And again, this was just something that he did a ton of times.
He is a very, very willing tackler. And when you look at his overall positively graded plays, he had 44 of them that were 10 yards or shorter. He is a absolute beast near the line of scrimmage, and he likes to mix it up. He plays with good leverage. He's a smart football player. The next play is going to be a play where he does something very, very similar, but in space. He goes up against what many consider to be the best tackle in the draft and gets right by him.
Yeah, so he's going to be here on this play, and they're actually, so he's tracking the receiver here in motion, and they're going to, again, throw a screen to this guy, but you're going to see Penei Sewell kind of get out and end up being the one that's responsible for trying to block Molden and get it out. And so here we see a little good and bad. I mean, the bad end that we'll get to, and let me go ahead and let it run here. But yeah, as you can see initially, basically does a great job of defeating the block and getting in position to make tackle. Here he doesn't quite finish the deal, but thankfully this wasn't really a consistent issue on his tape. I mean, from a tackling standpoint, was very good. Didn't miss a lot of tackles in college. But yeah, I think you see, again, him going up against an NFL caliber, top 5, top 10 pick here in Penei Sewell and able to, again, slip by that block and get in position to make a tackle right around the line of scrimmage. And this was just an area that he was very good in.
I don't know that that's a block that I'm expecting him to win often. And Sewell knows it too. If you let the play run all the way to the end, you can see Sewell's mad at himself.
Yeah.
He turns around and he's like, that guy is 5'6" and I missed him. But when Molden's someone who may project a safety. He's in this kind of bucket of players that's in like the nickel corner, maybe safety. Think of how the Niners use DJ Reed. And so when he's able to see what's in front of him and play downhill, he can be pretty effective. And, he's not afraid to take on blocks in the box, even if he doesn't necessarily have the frame to take a lot of them on a lot of times. But now we get to, what happens when he's actually got to, get a clean hit on a player and playing downhill. And man, if he ever plays or hits someone that's smaller than him, look out.
There are some guys that are just, I think, better when they get a play downhill and get to really kind of see everything in front of them, right? And I think Molden's one of those guys. So again, he's here in the slot, and here they're kind of going to end up sort of kind of faking a screen concept. So you're going to see this inside most slot receiver run very shallow into the flat, and this receiver here is going to kind of act like he's going to block Molden, but then you're going to see him kind of break inside for the slant there. So it ends up being a matter of Molden just really needing to read the route concept correctly, but then he's really got a free shot here to kind of break on that inside most slot receiver. So you'll see him, as it runs here, again, he's going to kind of hesitate a little bit, but then it's a zone concept, so he knows that he doesn't need to follow that guy inside on the slant. I'm going to keep my outside leverage. And then you see, just him come downhill and lay a very nice hit on a much smaller player.
Yeah, and sometimes this is referred to as click and close, where you've got basically the corner who's able to see what happens. It clicks in his mind, and then he's going to close down on that space. And at this point, destroy that poor little guy. I mean, look at those two guys. This is just little on little crime. As a short man myself, I can say these things. But the thing about him is that when he's operating downhill, he's going to be very, very good. He is good at recognizing what's in front of him. The Niners play a lot of zone, especially asking their nickel to play a lot of zone. So that bodes well if the Niners do end up drafting him. But he can also carry verticals up the seam. Obviously, nickel cornerbacks aren't just going to play within 10 yards. They have to be able to carry and match receivers up the field. And he can do that very, very well, especially from the slot.
Yeah, so it is, I think, probably the next strongest part of his game. So he's going to be here, and they're just going to, try to work this vertical route from the slot and get it out wide outside of the numbers there. And the thing that he does really well is kind of, either get hands-on early or really get in on these vertical routes, like get on top of it or on that hip very early on. And let me actually go back to sideline here before we get to that. But yeah, so you can just see him here kind of, after the snap right here, I'm going to maintain that high leverage, right? You want to ideally kind of stay on top of that receiver and at least get kind of right on that hip, which he does kind of like fall off a little bit, but this is perfect, right? I mean, because it essentially at this point, the only way that this can be completed is you need an absolute perfect throw to kind of this area outside the numbers. It needs to get over the top. Anything other than an absolutely perfect ball, which he's still going to have at this position, a chance to kind of play through the hands on the receiver there and get something on that pass and affect things. But anything other than that is something that he should be able to take care of, which as we get to the end zone view here now, we'll kind of get to see what he does at the catch point here and getting this pass knocked away. But this was, again, something that he did consistently on tape very well, which was just carry these vertical routes from the slot where you do have, it's a little bit different than doing this on the sideline as an outside cornerback. You have a lot more space that this receiver can run to, right? Who's starting kind of more inside in this area. He's got all this space outside to run to. He did typically a very good job on this stuff.
And if you didn't recognize that quarterback, that is one Mr. Zach Wilson.
Sure is.
This is from 2019. And so, yeah, this is definitely an NFL quarterback, even if it may not be an NFL receiver, but he plays it very, very well in space. And he's on an island. I mean, that was man coverage, effectively, and that they were in cover one. But now we get to some of the concerns with Elijah Molden. And while he is very good at carrying receivers vertically up the seam, especially from the slot, he is not a physically imposing individual. And when he doesn't get hands on early, or if he's got a size matchup, as you can see here, is a pretty disparate size matchup, he is at a disadvantage and can get beat, even if he's in a perfect position.
Yeah, so here again, like you mentioned, you've got this receiver here who clearly has some size, and that's going to be something that he's going to have some difficulty dealing with, right? So again, you get the same exact thing that we saw in the previous play, where you're getting him in the same position, getting the vertical route from the slot, and he's not, again, in terrible position here, right? So he's a little bit lower on the receiver, kind of falls a little bit underneath, but really this is a matter of the receiver just being a bigger target, right? And being able to go up over the top of Molden, and rather than this ball being something that he can kind of get hands on, because, the receivers at a similar height and stature as him. Like these bigger slot receivers that you sometimes saw him go up against, just were able to kind of go up over the top of him, even when he was in pretty good position to make a play on the ball.
Yeah, and this is Davis Mills, that he is another quarterback that's likely going to get drafted. This is not a bad throw. I mean, it's a pretty good throw.
Oh, yeah.
But it's still one of those things where this is why you like corners with a little bit longer arms. It gives them more of an air range where they can be a little bit maybe not in phase or even in phase, but because they have a long arm, they can reach out and maybe disrupt that pass or even have long enough arms to play through the receiver. He had none of those opportunities here because, I mean, he doesn't have the size to do that. And so then we get to another play where this is something similar, where he cannot get really, he's just disadvantaged by his size, and ultimately it ends up costing him on the rep.
So same thing here, and here we see the win a little bit earlier on, right? So he's trying to get, and I'm going to let it run here. He's trying to get that press more a little bit than the previous play. But this receiver, again, being a bigger target, being a little bit more physical, is able to kind of get around him, eventually get on top of him here, right? This is the big thing. He does get, I mean, this receiver gets pushed really wide, to Molden's credit here, right? So ideally this receiver wants to stay much tighter to these numbers, so he gives the quarterback the space out here to be able to throw the ball to, right? So he gets pushed wide to the sideline, but once you fall underneath like this, once you get behind the receiver, then he's got all the advantage, right? He's got all the leverage, and it becomes very difficult to make a play on any sort of pass that isn't just drastically underthrown. And so here, again, you see the size, a bigger receiver, able to kind of deal with the physicality at the line of scrimmage and get on top of him and make a big play.
Yeah, and if you think about, the Brandon Marshall game against Jimmy Ward, you think about just being bodied from the slot because you're going to go up against big wide receivers. And now in the NFL, your big receivers, you can put them anywhere. It's not like you are just exclusively going to put them on the outside. A good offensive coordinator is going to say, oh, little dude in the slot, let me go ahead and see if I can win with a big dude in there, if that's going to be something that I can do. Now, one of the things that he is, he tends to win early if he can get his hands on you. But if he doesn't, if he allows a free release, his change of direction skills are not such that he can recover if he takes a false step or if he goes up against someone who's really, really speedy. So his size is an issue, but he's also got some change of direction stuff you've got to be concerned with.
Yeah, ideally you would like to see, the smaller cornerbacks, they can at least make up for it with the quickness and the change of direction. I think it was just something, he's a smaller guy that plays more physically. So it really is his game. A lot of is getting hands on early in the route. And so you're going to see this slot receiver here. This is 4th and 10. He's just going to kind of work this in breaking route here, but he does a good job on the release of kind of getting inside and making sure that Molden doesn't get clean contact. And there you see at the break, right, him gain that separation. At that point, it's all over. I mean, Molden's able to recover and make a tackle, but at that point, it's too late. The play is a success for the offense. They're converting on 4th and 10, and it's just, this is something when he doesn't get hands on here, right? There were a lot of plays where you see him make that contact here, and then he can kind of slow the receiver down a little bit. He can kind of ride that hip, and then he's in position when this ball is thrown to make a play on it, right? And get hands on and kind of knock it down. But when he doesn't get those hands on, he just doesn't have the quickness to make up for it and still be a factor in the play.
And then the next snap, really the last one that we're going to talk about here, is another snap where he's in press man, doesn't get his hands on, and ends up losing the rep because he just doesn't have the change of direction chops to stick with some of these shifty receivers.
So very similar thing here. He's up tighter to the line of scrimmage, but you're going to get a slant from the slot receiver here as they kind of motion the back to hopefully open things up here on the inside. And again, just you see a nice release from the receiver who is able to get inside of him. He doesn't get any contact there in that window, and then just doesn't have the athleticism to be able to close and ends up, giving up a big play here because he's not in position to even make the tackle as the ball is thrown.
Now, overall, I think that he is a strong, smart, instinctual player that will end up destroying some people within 10 yards. And if he can work downhill and really see things in front of him, he can be successful, I think, in the NFL. And if the Niners are going to play him at safety or play him in a lot of zone coverage, I think that may be where his best fit may be. If he's going to have to play a lot of man coverage snaps, or if they're expecting him to win with his size or athleticism, I don't think that's necessarily Molden's game. He's someone that is, overall a pretty fun prospect to watch, but one that would definitely, you'd watch for some of the concerns in terms of change of direction and his ability to hold up in terms of his size if he's going to succeed at the next level. So that's our scouting report on Elijah Molden. Thanks again for tuning in. And as always, go Niners. Scribbling video in 3, 2, 1.
Oh, that person is probably dead if it was
we don't even know if that person's going to be here on Sundays.
Oh, fuck.